Now let's move on to the second concept, undue influence, which is under section 16. Now section 16 defines undue influence as a contract is said to be induced by undue influence where the relations subsisting between the parties are such that one of the parties is in a position to dominate the will of the other and uses that position to obtain an unfair advantage over the other. Now, a person is deemed to be in a position to dominate the will of another where he holds a real or apparent authority over the other. Example, the relationship between master and servant or doctor and patient. Or where he stands in a fiduciary relation. Very fiduciary relationship means relations of trust and confidence to other. Example, the relationship between a father and son, solicitor and client, trustee and beneficiary, etc. Where he makes a contract with a person whose mental capacity is temporarily or permanently affected by reason of age, illness or bodily distress. Example, a relationship between a medical attendant and his patient. Now, in the case Manu Singh versus Umadat Pandey, a spiritual guru induced his devotee to give to him the whole of his property in return of a promise of salvation of the devotee. It was held that the consent of the devotee was given under undue influence. Another case we'll discuss is Inji Norai versus Sheikh Ali bin Omar. Here, in this case, an illiterate elderly woman made a gift deed of practically the whole of her property to her nephew who managed her affairs. It was held by the court the gift should be set aside on the ground of undue influence. Now let's move on to the next concept, misrepresentation. A statement of fact which one party makes in the course of negotiations with the view to inducing the other party to enter into a contract is known as representation. It may be expressed by words, spoken or written, or implied from the acts and conducts of the parties. A representation, when wrongly made, either innocently or intentionally, is misrepresentation. Now, misrepresentation may be innocent or unintentional misrepresentation. If it is done intentionally or deliberately, it would lead to fraud. Misrepresentation is a misstatement of a material fact made innocently with the honest belief as to its truth or non-disclosure of a material fact without intent to deceive the other party. For example, A, while selling his horse to B, tells him that the horse is thoroughly sound. A genuinely believes the horse to be sound, although he has no sufficient ground for the belief. Later on, B finds the horse to be unsound. The representation made by A is misrepresentation. Now, the important case under misrepresentation is Derry versus Peak. In this case, a company's prospectus contained a representation that it had statutory powers to run its tramways by steam power provided the consent of a government authority was obtained. The directors issued a prospectus stating therein that the permission for the use of steam power would be granted. The permission was refused. The company went into liquidation. It was held that the directors were guilty of misrepresentation and not fraud because the directors of the company honestly believed that the permission would be granted by the concerned government. With such belief, they had already printed in the prospectus that they had power to run the tramways using steam power. So the court held that it amounted only to misrepresentation and not fraud. Now, the requirements of misrepresentation are as follows. First one, it must be a representation of material fact. Mere expression of an opinion does not amount to misrepresentation even if it turns out to be wrong. Second one, it must be made before the conclusion of the contract with the view to inducing the other party to enter into the contract. Third one, it must be made with the intention that it should be acted upon by the person to whom it is addressed. Fourth one, it must actually have been acted upon and must have induced the contract. Fifth one, it must be wrong but the person who made it honestly believed it to be true. So this is regarding misrepresentation.